Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee. I figured I'd come on. I'm going to just turn my phone off real quick so that we don't get any interference. Figured I'd come on now and just do a quick update on what is going on with some of the new models that are coming in and what we're seeing with respect to Florence at the moment. It reached a peak intensity uh, earlier, late this afternoon, early this evening, and the pressure leveled off. It's actually risen a little bit. The eye is a little ragged from what it looked earlier, but make no mistake, it's still a powerful hurricane. And you can see it here on the satellite loop, but you can also see the edge of tropical storm Isaac, which was taken down a notch coming into the picture from the east, heading toward the southern Leeward Islands. Also, by the way, note disturbed weather in the Gulf of Mexico that is showing some signs of organization. I'm sorry, in the Northwest Caribbean. I keep saying the Gulf of Mexico, mainly because that's where it's going, but it's in the Northwest Caribbean, is showing signs of organization and might become a bit of a player here as it gets into the Gulf because it's going to impact the ridge that's in the eastern part of the United States. Hard to know how this is all going to play out yet, but a lot of pieces in the puzzle even now as we get into the short range. Now, on the 11 p.m. advisory, we the Hurricane Center uh, did adjust it slightly to the east. So if I bring up the map, it has the track now closer to Jacksonville, North Carolina, coming in as a major hurricane and then continuing northwest from there. They really didn't do too much in the way of changes, just sort of some minor adjustments. The general theme of the forecast remains the same. And if we put the likelihood, the likely arrival time of gales, this is 8 a.m. Thursday. You can see the line there just offshore. So during the day on Thursday, weather conditions will deteriorate. It would seem that usually with hurricanes, of course, the west side is the weaker side, and that would put Wilmington on the weaker side. It would put Myrtle Beach on the far end of the weaker side. So if this holds, this would be good news for South Carolina, but notice the cone of uncertainty still stretches west of Myrtle Beach, but not quite to Charleston with that eastward adjustment. And I think we're going to see these adjustments continue as we go forward. And the track is still to take it straight inland, even though we do have models that are doing all sorts of strange things with loops and stalls and all the rest of it. The Hurricane Center is kind of sticking with the idea of the European model, which wants to bring it inland before it starts doing some stalling. One thing that we're pretty sure of is the fact that you're going to see the storm slow down in its forward speed once it approaches the coast, and that could impact the intensity somewhat as more of the circulation gets over land. It could knock it down a peg, but make no mistake, it still will be a powerful hurricane as it approaches land and moves inland. Uh, Now, the intensity guidance. Even though we've seen the strength level off, it's likely that we'll probably see another round of strengthening beginning once this eyewall replacement cycle is finished. What that means is the thunderstorms around the eye, they form, they reach their peak, they mature, and then what happens is the wall will break down, and then a new eye wall will form to replace that. So while that happens, you get fluctuations in intensity. Usually, you'll see the pressure come up a bit, and then when the new eye gets going, the pressures will start to drop. And we do have a number of the models keeping it as a Category 4 uh, right up until right before landfall. And we do have two models of the intensity models that actually bring it to a minimal Category 5. So I think that is still possible that you could wind up seeing this get to a Category 5 status. The guidance, this is from earlier. Let me refresh that just to make sure we get the latest. This was the GFS ensembles, which were basically most of the members of that ensemble group were actually to the left of the operational, and bringing it into North Carolina. You can see all the different paths and tracks. You get a headache looking at all these different models. You have a few outliers that actually want to bring it up further north. That seems highly unlikely at this point. Um, the you got to remember that when you look at all these different members, they don't have the resolution that the operational does. The operational has much more data in it, so it's usually far more reliable than the ensembles. Although as you go into the longer range, they are a bit more useful because you can at least see where some of the trends might be. It might give you a hint of what the models might do down the road. So I have the new GFS out. We have it out to 132 hours. So let me just roll it back. And it brings it just about onto the coast here before it stalls it, nudges it to the east, then nudges it to the north, then nudges it back to the southwest, and then straddles it. Look at this. I mean, this GFS is just insane here. Why is it doing this? And this is where, again, it's very important that we don't focus is that map that we showed you is the official forecast, and this is the one that you should really be looking at the moment. The reason is we look at the upper air, and again, back in the just gets trapped, and now that ridge that's in the west to the west of it begins to build over the top. You see how I'll back it up again. You can see how the upper high here just builds right over the top and then shoves it back westward. Look, is this probable? I think it's probably going to change again in these small deviations that we're getting, but they're significant and important to pay attention to. If this were to happen, then yeah, you probably could bring it to the shore, and then it winds up then responding to this upper high late Thursday, and then it does this loop, and this is Sunday morning. So you're talking Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, 3 days of having it sit out here and doing this. Now then it wants to take it inland into eastern South Carolina and starts to drive it north. So this is one possibility. I'm going to see if we have the Canadian model in. And we'll take a look at what that adventure is. And unfortunately, we only have out to 12 hours, so we don't have enough of the Canadian model. So the GFS really is all we have at this point. The European doesn't come out till 2 a.m. So when I do my live stream tomorrow morning at 9, we'll take a look at that. So don't walk away from this thinking that this is what's going to happen, because that would be an error. Always remember, do not use these maps in any kind of in your decision making. You should always defer to the National Hurricane Center, and you can go to get the latest information on nhc.noaa.gov and your local National Weather Service office, which would be at weather.gov. Very, very important that you remember that. The rainfall here, now of course this is going to be based on the track that the model shows, and this is only out till Sunday afternoon, and you can see the torrential rains of 12 inches or more along the coast, and typically with tropical systems it is way underdone. But I got to tell you, I'm not confident in what's being presented here at all. We are going to have to look at what the other models do, and as a reminder, the European, which has been, of all the models, has been the most consistent, showing pretty much the same idea for days now, and this is what it was earlier. And we'll bring it up just to remind you. It brings it pretty much straight into North Carolina, probably close to Wilmington, and then up into the North Carolina-Virginia border, where it just kind of moves very slowly between Friday and Saturday, and then it moves northwest from there. That's another possibility. There's between you have the big ridge that's building, splitting, and then building across the top. It's very, this is as complex a scenario as I've ever seen. When you have a trough in the eastern part of the United States where you have a strong southerly flow, it's fairly straightforward. The hurricane gets into that southerly flow and then moves up along it. So you can just you can pretty much sort of draw a line, two lines, three lines actually: the eastern edge, the western edge, and then the line in the middle, which is where you think the track is going to be. But when you've got uh, a situation where you're talking about where you're dealing with an upper air where there is virtually no flow, you've got forecast problems, and I think um, that's going to be front and center with all of this. So remember again, nhc.noaa.gov for all the latest information that for the National Hurricane Center. And of course, with your local officials, they know the area you live in. I do not. The Your local officials, those are the people that you should be going to with regards to any kind of decision making. So I'm going to jump on the board real quick here and just say hi to everybody. And thank you very much for joining. I know this is sort of the late night update, and folks are probably most of you are probably you're awake, but a lot of people are asleep. Rob Bass, do I think the storms could affect the panhandle of Florida? No, I don't think it's going to go that far south. I really don't believe that's going to be that far south with regards to the track. Um, Chris Alley, oh, you're up late. Good to see you on board. Hope everything is well. Yeah, very weird indeed. We're getting coastal flooding here up the East Coast because of the new moon. And the tides are running higher than normal up and down the East Coast, which has been causing some problems. Coastal flood warnings that are up for New Jersey and parts of Long Island, and extending down further south than that. Mike Whalen, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Mika Licorius, Myrtle Beach, going to Metter, Georgia tomorrow. In a situation like this, what are you supposed to do? I mean, better safe than sorry, really, when you think about it. Um, you expect the worst case scenario and you hope for the best outcome, and that's really it. Uh, the variables are so are so large, and it's very, very difficult to everybody would like some certainty when it comes to tell me exactly where it's going to go. You can't do that. That's just not possible. Okay, the Hurricane Center has done a very good job with this. The storm has really behaved very well according to what the models have been indicating so far. But this has really been the easy part. It's and that hasn't been that easy. The hard part is coming over the next couple of days, and it's going to be critical that this gets nailed down somehow. And I think there are going to probably be a few more surprises being thrown along the way. Mirtha Gunther, good to see you. The rain amounts, okay, I'll do it one more time. We'll bring up the, do I have it on the board here? I don't. Um, maybe maybe there's, I'll bring the GFS up, the rainfall amounts. Again, this is based on the fact that the model is taking the track that it's taking. I wouldn't necessarily forecast it that way, but that's what it's doing. Here's the GFS model rainfall. Maps, by the way, courtesy of Tropical Tidbits. Thanks to Levi Cowan for this great site. And the yellows are basically a foot plus. The orange is 10 plus, and the bright yellow is actually almost as high as 15 to 20. The dark purple on the scale on the side would be 6-inch rains, and with tropical systems, it could easily be double these amounts. And this is again predicated on that course that it has, so it keeps the heaviest rain in southern Virginia, western North Carolina, the back edge. That's when you're seeing 2 to 3 inch rain amounts, and then back into the eastern part of South Carolina, but easternmost South Carolina and the coastal coastal zones of North Carolina to just inland by about 100 or so miles. That area winds up with the big rains. Again, all of this all of this assumes that the GFS track is correct, and we don't know that that's the case. I want to, while I have it up here, just let's put up the Canadian model, see if we got a little more of it. Well, it's out to 48 hours now, so it's still not out far enough. By the way, for those of you who are watching from my neck of the woods in the Northeast, we have this dying cold front, and we're seeing some downpours and thunderstorms. Some are moving through tonight. We'll probably see them again tomorrow and probably again on Wednesday. I don't expect to see much impact when the hurricane gets really close. Oftentimes what happens is on the northern edge of it, you probably get some subsidence. In other words, some drying because the air is sinking. So weather conditions here on Thursday probably won't be that bad. It'll just be very warm and humid. We're seeing the warm front that's going through tonight, and that is bringing back the warm tropical air. I don't expect it to get oppressive like we had last week. That was a whole different scenario we were dealing with. Big ridge in the east, yeah, but with no tropical storm, and you're getting all this, tropical inflow. So there's probably going to be clouds that will hold the temperatures down. But there will be some occasional downpours and thunderstorms to deal with on Tuesday, and again on Wednesday. Coming back to you guys now here on the board. I think Bob's place, the Delmarva Peninsula, is probably going to be, at least for now, it would be too far north for anything to worry about, other than maybe some fringe rain if it makes it that far north. And I guess that would depend on, if the landfall winds up being further northeast along the Carolina coast, you could conceivably see the northern fringes of the rain get into the Delmarva Peninsula. But bear in mind that after it goes inland, we're going to have to deal with whatever track that it takes, and we don't really know at this point. If we go back to the old, say for the European, for example, that would be a big rain event for North Carolina and Virginia, and you might push that rain even further north into Maryland and Pennsylvania. But if it doesn't do that, if it doesn't go straight inland and then turn northward or northwestward, you may not get that. So that part of the equation, I think, still remains to be solved, and we may not have the answer to that question until late in the game. Anthony Orr, let me just go back to your question. Just hang on 1 second. What would have to happen for Florence not to make landfall and keep the destructive winds offshore? Well, if you have a complete breakdown of the ridge where there's an opening for it to just kind of find a weakness and meander its way through, then it's possible that you could have it, stall out just offshore and keep the destructive winds. Of course, that would assume that it never makes landfall at all. I don't. It doesn't seem likely to me that we're not going to see a landfall someplace. It would seem that we would have to have a landfall someplace. Bob's place, is it possible for it to come up Chesapeake Bay the way Hazel did? Again, I would say right now I would bet against it, but this is a very unusual situation because of the fact that you're not dealing with a strong upper air flow. You're dealing with very weak steering currents, and there could be more surprises in store here. Philadelphia is too far north. I think you're going to be fine. There's no issues regarding landfalls for your area. The landfall is going to be where it is in North Carolina. The question is whether eventually some of that rain finds its way up the East Coast, and I again question that can't be answered at this point. Chris Alley, I'm going to be at the Deer Park Library on Sunday, September 16th at 2 o'clock. So if you can, come on out. Deer Park Library. It'll be timely because it seems like there will be something. Florence will still be going on with the at that point. Let's take a look at Issac really fast. And just give me a minute here. I'm going to I'm going to try to bring up the new satellite for Isaac, and it's just going to take a little bit of maneuvering on my part. So let me go back to this satellite, and I'm going to have to take. I got the Caribbean view here now, so probably going to have to take the wider view. And you can see it here. You can also see Helene, which has a pretty big eye there, and that's moving northwestward, staying out in the open waters of the Atlantic. Isaac is the smaller system that's ahead of it, and it is weakened to a tropical storm. The Hurricane Center pointing out that the center on the satellites, I didn't get a chance to really look at it, but the center on the satellites, it looks like it's kind of run out a bit ahead of the main convection, so the system is a bit distorted at the moment. It still has a favorable environment ahead of it for it to strengthen a bit. I don't think it'll strengthen in a big way, but it might get back to hurricane status. And heading westward, most of the track model guidance has Isaac going into the Leeward Islands. Let me we'll bring up the Hurricane Center forecast for Isaac. And you see it here, getting it back to hurricane status during Tuesday, and then approaching the southern leewards on Thursday, weakening to a tropical storm when it goes into the Caribbean, and then they keep it pretty much on a straight westerly course. This agrees with a lot of the track models that we've looked at. There are still a couple of models that want to turn it northward before it gets to the leewards. Sometimes these storms like to do that. Not sure if this is going to be the case this time around. The system is very, very small. Compared to the other two you saw on the satellite, it is small. It's probably only about 100 miles across. So the islands are basically going to be targets for the system to hit, and it's going to have to come very close to have some impact. But nonetheless, the islands should be on alert. I suspect that some sort of watches will probably go up for some of the Leeward Islands on Tuesday. And of course, there will probably be hurricane and storm surge watches that will go up for the Carolinas tomorrow. So a bit of early lead time that the Hurricane Center is going to be able to give. And of course, this is as well advertised a storm that that we've seen in quite a while. So I don't think it's going to be a big shock to anybody if we wind up with hurricane watches tomorrow morning. So I think that about covers it. Maybe one more shot. We'll take a look and see if the Canadian is in, or at least enough of it. That'll at least give us another option to compare. Thank you, Dio. I appreciate it. Hitting super chat. Thank you very much. Hold on. Let me bring up the screen. It's being stubborn on me. I have a lot of things going on in the background. Thankfully, I'm not losing the signal this morning, so that's a good thing. Okay, so here we go. See if the Canadian, nope, still only out to 48 hours. I'll just jump to 72 hours. And you can see the Canadian is actually a bit further to the east here as it takes it more toward eastern North Carolina by 72 hours. How reliable is it? I don't know. Why is it doing that? Well, it's because of how the Canadian, which tends to be the squirrelier of all the models, and we do actually have the upper air in, so we can take a look at that. All right, that's a good thing. All right, so let's see what it's doing here on the upper air. So you got the ridge, cradles it, pretty much the same like the GFS. Then you've got the ridge breaking down, and then it just basically stalls it out and moves it westward into North Carolina. So it gets it to eastern North Carolina and then takes it straight west into western North Carolina, Western Virginia, and West Virginia by Monday morning. So let's look at what the rainfall is on the Canadian. And on this model, unfortunately, only out to 66 hours. So it's not out far enough. So the upper air is telling us on the Canadian that it wants to go, on that model, it has it turning northward and then stalling and then doing the same thing that the GFS does. When you look at the models, it really is a matter of placement. Uh, where where does the hurricane get to before it stalls and does this kind of loop and then goes back southwest and westward? And the GFS has it further south, and the Canadian has it northeast of there. I think the Canadian might be a little bit out to lunch having it that far to the north and east. The GFS is probably more correct in having it more southwest of there. I still don't know whether the loop idea is correct, but again, this is all with the upper high, and I can say, at least from the standpoint of past performance, which is not necessarily an indication that it's going to work this time around, that the European has usually handled these things a bit better, and it wants to, that the day run and the run before that and the run before that and the run before that, still very consistent, bringing it into the southern part of North Carolina and then taking it inland. So that's what the Hurricane Center is going with. I see no reason to argue against it. But again, remember, it's going to be there are going to be some weird. I still think there are going to be some weird things that are going to happen with all of this. All right, so let me just remind everybody. I'll show you real quick here. For those of you who are weather geeks, so you can take a look at all the stuff I put on, and there is a lot of it. And you can do that on my Patreon page. Now, come on, do it again. Oh, I am tired. Why is it not doing that? It's being evil. Okay, so there we go. This is my Patreon page, and we have not only all the posts from my websites, but videos as well, and we have some videos that we'll be doing that are just going to be exclusive to Patreon members. So it's a great way to support what I'm doing and to support my channel, and I really appreciate those of you who have joined. Thank you very much. And with respect to I'll put the link up. There's a link up on the descriptor to this video, so you can access it that way. I'll put a link on the chat board for those of you who are interested. You can go over there. It's only $2 a month to join, and I'm going to have I'll be hopefully in a couple of weeks working on an app. The weather app that's going to be coming out, and Patreon does also have an app where you can download my stuff on there, and you can look at it. You can download the Patreon app, and you can take a look at all the weather stuff that is involved, not only with Florence, but with everything else that's going on. I tend to cover, for those of you who are watching other parts of the country, my area is New Jersey, Long Island, New York City, the Hudson Valley, Connecticut, southern New England, and eastern Pennsylvania. But we do touch on weather elsewhere, as you know, by the live streams that I've been doing. We'll do a full live stream update tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Eastern time, and then again tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. If you missed tonight's, it was great. I had my colleague Joe Rayo on with me, and we had meteorologist Bill Goodman from the National Weather Service in New York, in the New York area, my area. It's in Upton, New York, here on Long Island, that covers northeast New Jersey, New York City, Long Island, southern Connecticut, and the Hudson Valley. And it was a great discussion. He knows his stuff, and we discussed all the possibilities with respect to Hurricane Florence. Everybody have a great night. Go to sleep, and we'll see you in the morning.